You are blind, and you're in a wheelchair. How dare you think you can marry me? Her voice cut through the air like a knife. A beautiful woman like me, marry you? Both blind and crippled? You must be joking. People stared. Silence fell. And still, she kept talking. But don't worry, she sneered. I won't let you go empty-handed. You can marry my cousin sister, Nora. She is poor and classless. She can marry anything, even a madman. Let her be your wife. She is more than willing. And with those cruel words, a destiny was thrown away like trash. But what she didn't know was this. The man she mocked, the girl she insulted, were about to write a story that would shock everyone, most especially her. This story would touch you in a way you didn't expect. Stay with us. You aren't ready for what's coming next. It is in the heart. Sandra thought she had finally found the perfect rich man to marry. He had money, looks, and power, everything she ever dreamed of. But on the day she went to meet him, something shocked her so deeply she could hardly breathe. Oba village was small, quiet, and full of whispers. Whenever anything happened, the news spread faster than Harmattan fire. So when a shiny black car rolled into the market square, people abandoned their chores and gathered quickly. Who is that? Women murmured, eyes shining with curiosity. A wealthy man, no doubt, the elders said knowingly. From the car stepped a man named Daniel. Tall, well-dressed in an expensive dark suit, wearing deep black sunglasses. His face was calm, unreadable. He stood still, saying nothing. Just then, Sandra appeared, bright and bold in a tight yellow dress, her high heels clicking sharply on the rough ground. She flicked her hair proudly and smiled as the villagers stared. See, Sandra announced in a loud, triumphant voice. I told all of you I am special. My fiancé has come from the city. Those of you who mocked me, look well. The villagers whispered again, some surprised, some jealous. Sandra tried to take Daniel's hand, smiling like a queen. But Daniel didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't even turn his head. Suddenly, Daniel's driver rushed forward, panting. Madam, please, forgive us, he said breathlessly. Oh good Daniel, he cannot see. He is blind. Blind. Sandra shouted, snatching back her hand as if she had touched fire. Are you insane? You brought a blind man for me. Before anyone could react, she raised a hand and slapped Daniel hard across the face. The slap echoed through the entire market. People gasped. Mouths hung open in shock. Sandra stormed away, angrily, shoving people aside as she left. Minutes later, she returned, dragging her shy cousin Nora by the arm. Nora was quiet, dressed in a simple blue gown, eyes filled with fear. This is Nora, Sandra announced sharply. Let her marry him. I cannot marry a man who cannot see. Daniel turned his head gently toward the trembling girl. His voice was soft, almost tender. Nora, would you marry a blind man? Nora froze. She didn't know what to say. Sandra leaned close to her, whispering fiercely. If you refuse, I swear you will regret it forever. Say yes, or you will see trouble. Nora trembled, tears gathering in her eyes. She hesitated again, terrified. Then suddenly, Sandra slapped her hard across the face. Nora staggered back, clutching her burning cheek as tears streamed down. How dare you think of refusing? Sandra screamed. You think you're too good? Be grateful I'm giving you a rich husband. The villagers watched silently. Some pitied Nora, their eyes full of sympathy. Others whispered about Sandra's cruel heart. Nora slowly lifted her eyes toward Daniel. The blind man stood quietly, waiting. He seemed kind despite everything that had happened. He didn't look angry or hurt, just calm, patient, listening. Nora took a deep breath. Her life was about to change forever. But first, she needed the courage to speak. The entire Oba village watched her, waiting for her answer. She trembled, the pain from Sandra's slap still burning on her cheek. Daniel gently repeated, Nora, will you marry me even if I am blind? Nora swallowed her fear and finally spoke. Yes, sir, but I will only call myself your wife when I can walk beside you, not behind you. The villagers murmured in admiration, impressed by her brave words. Daniel smiled softly and reached out his hand to her. Nora hesitated, then slowly placed her hand into his. Later that day, Nora arrived at Daniel's mansion. She gasped the moment she saw it. The house was massive, shining brilliantly in the sunlight. Bigger, richer, and more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. Is this your home? She asked quietly, her voice trembling. Yes, Daniel replied gently, sensing her awe. Now it is also your home. Nora guided Daniel inside, holding his arm carefully. But as they stepped onto the polished marble floor, the beauty of the mansion distracted her. She forgot to warn him about the small step. Daniel stumbled and nearly fell. Oh no! I'm so sorry. Nora cried, grabbing him quickly. Forgive me. I wasn't careful enough. Daniel chuckled softly. Don't worry, Nora. Even people who can see sometimes trip in this house. As they entered the main hall, the servants stood in neat lines, bowing respectfully. They greeted Nora warmly, their smiles welcoming. This is my wife, Nora, Daniel announced clearly. Treat her with kindness, dignity, and respect. She is now the madam of this house. Nora's heart raced. For the first time in her life, she felt important, valued. She smiled softly, hiding her nervousness. That night, Nora sat alone in her luxurious room, thinking deeply. Suddenly, there came a gentle knock on her door. Come in, she whispered. Daniel entered slowly, holding something small in his hand. He moved carefully, guiding himself with his cane. Nora, he said softly, sitting down nearby. I know you did not choose this life. I will not force you to stay. He extended the object toward her. It was a blank check. Nora stared at it, confused. Write any amount you want, Daniel explained gently. Take the money and leave freely. No conditions. No questions. I will understand. Nora held the check, her fingers trembling. Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head firmly. Sir, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. Maybe I didn't choose to come here, but now, I choose to stay. Daniel remained quiet, touched by her words. He nodded slowly, a warm smile forming. Thank you, Nora, he whispered as he stood. You are braver and kinder than I expected. When he left the room, Nora placed the check carefully on the table. She didn't want money. She wanted respect, dignity, and maybe, just maybe, a small chance at happiness. As days passed, Nora quietly adjusted to her new home. At night, Daniel often struggled to sleep. He coughed and sometimes felt dizzy. Whenever this happened, Nora quietly cared for him, bringing water, supporting him gently, helping him lie comfortably. One late night, as Nora gently placed a cool cloth on Daniel's forehead, he softly asked her, Nora, tell me truthfully, are you truly happy here? Nora paused, her hand frozen on the cloth. Why do you ask that, sir? She replied quietly. Daniel sighed gently. Because you deserve happiness. And if being here makes you unhappy, please tell me. Nora smiled softly in the dark. You don't know what I deserve, but I want to be here with you. Daniel nodded slowly, touched by her honesty. Yet deep inside, he still feared Nora was staying only out of duty, not choice. From that day, things began to change between them. Daniel became warmer, happier, laughing more easily. He found comfort in Nora's quiet strength. Nora also found herself smiling more, feeling a peace she had never known. One morning, as Nora sat alone combing her hair, Daniel quietly entered her room holding a cup of tea. She was startled to see him moving confidently, without his cane. Good morning, Nora, Daniel said warmly, smiling as he handed her the tea. You look lovely today in that dress. Nora froze. She looked down at her green dress, then back at Daniel. You're not blind, she whispered, heart pounding. Daniel smiled softly, nodding. No, Nora. I never was. Nora felt dizzy, confusion washing over her. But, why? She asked weakly. Daniel sat beside her, his expression gentle but serious. Nora, when you have money, everyone pretends to love you. I wanted someone who would care for me even if I had nothing. So I pretended to be blind, to see who truly cared. Nora stared at him, emotion swelling. She remembered every moment she helped him, believing he couldn't see. So all those nights, she whispered, tears forming. Every time I guided you, you were watching. Yes, Daniel said softly, reaching for her hand. And every time I saw a kind woman, someone who cared without expecting reward, I saw someone I could love. Nora stayed silent for a long moment, trying to understand her feelings. Finally, she looked at Daniel's calm face and smiled gently. You have a strange way of doing things, she said warmly. But, thank you for trusting me. Daniel laughed softly, relieved. For the first time, their smiles were real, honest, filled with hope. Nora stared quietly at Daniel, her heart beating fast. The truth was heavy, and her emotions tangled between shock and anger. Daniel watched her closely, waiting. So, you pretended to be blind just to find real love? She asked softly but firmly. Yes, Daniel replied honestly. People always saw my money, not me. I wanted someone who cared for my heart, not my wealth. Nora took a deep breath, calming herself. She felt hurt and confused, but also touched by his honesty. Slowly, she stood and poured tea into a cup, handing it gently to Daniel. Your method was crazy, she whispered with a small smile. But, thank you for choosing me. Daniel took the tea gratefully. I'm sorry I deceived you, Nora. Can you forgive me? She nodded softly. I already have. Daniel suddenly reached into his pocket and slowly knelt before her. He held out a small shining ring. Nora, he said seriously, this time I propose properly, as a man who can see clearly. Will you truly be my wife? Not out of pity, but because your heart chooses me. Nora's eyes filled with happy tears. Without hesitation, she nodded. Yes, Daniel, she whispered brightly. I choose you. Meanwhile, back in Oba village, Sandra's life had fallen apart. Her big dreams of marrying a rich man had crumbled. Instead of luxury, she now stood by a dusty roadside, heavily pregnant, selling fried rice on a small wooden table. Her once bright dresses were now worn and faded with struggle. Sandra wiped sweat from her forehead, feeling shame burn within her each time someone she knew walked past, whispering. The man she thought was a wealthy fiancé had been a liar, a poor con man who left her alone with nothing. Now, Sandra struggled each day just to survive. One hot afternoon, while she quietly served customers, a familiar car rolled to a stop nearby. Her heart jumped when she saw Daniel stepping out, confidently. No sunglasses. No cane. Behind him, smiling sweetly, was Nora. Sandra's face flushed hot with embarrassment. She tried to hide behind her table, but it was too late. Sandra. Nora said softly, approaching gently. Is that you? Sandra looked away in shame, tears filling her eyes. Daniel stepped closer, his voice calm and kind. Sandra. I was never blind, he said gently. I wanted true love. And thanks to you, I found Nora. Sandra's eyes widened in shock. You lied. Yes, Daniel answered calmly. And through that lie, I met the kindest woman. I owe you thanks. Sandra felt broken, humiliated. Her pride crumbled into dust. Sandra turned away, tears running down her face. Nora reached out, gently touching her cousin's shoulder. Sandra, don't leave like this. But Sandra shook her head, her voice trembling. Just leave me alone, please. She turned quickly and walked away in shame, leaving Nora and Daniel watching her sadly, wishing things could have been different. Nora stood quietly, tears falling down her own cheeks. She felt deeply hurt seeing Sandra suffer. Daniel gently took Nora's hand, guiding her back toward the car. That night, Nora sat silently in their room, staring at the floor. Daniel watched her from the doorway, feeling her pain. Nora, Daniel said softly as he approached her. He sat beside her and held her hand carefully. Are you all right? Nora sighed deeply, wiping her tears. I never wanted to see Sandra suffer like this. Even though she hurt me, she's still my family. Daniel squeezed her hand softly. I understand your pain, but Sandra must face her mistakes and find her own peace. Nora nodded slowly, leaning her head on Daniel's shoulder. I just wish I could help her somehow. Daniel gently stroked her hair, comforting her. Listen, Nora, we cannot help someone who refuses help. Let's not force her to come back unless it brings peace, not guilt or more pain. Nora closed her eyes, feeling a small wave of comfort. She held Daniel's hand tighter, drawing strength from him. "You're right, Daniel," she whispered. "But it's still hard to let go." "I know," Daniel replied softly, wrapping his arm around her protectively. "But sometimes, letting go is the best way to show love. If Sandra is ever ready to accept help, we will welcome her with open hearts." Nora smiled weakly and nodded. Together, they sat in quiet peace, sharing comfort and understanding. They knew the road ahead might be difficult, but they would face it together, stronger, wiser, and united by love. Far away, in a tiny room, Sandra sat alone. The walls around her were dirty and peeling. Empty pots lay scattered, painful reminders of her empty life. There was no laughter, no love, no one to comfort her. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing as loneliness pressed down on her. "Look at my life," she whispered painfully, staring at her growing belly. "Nora is pregnant with joy, and I'm pregnant with shame." Sandra felt deep regret. Her pride and greed had destroyed her happiness. There was no one left to blame but herself. She cried quietly into the night, wishing she could rewrite her mistakes. Meanwhile, in Daniel's beautiful mansion, the sun shone warmly on a blooming garden. Birds sang cheerfully as flowers swayed in the gentle breeze. Nora stood smiling happily, her belly beautifully rounded with Daniel's child. She glowed softly, filled with peace and joy. Suddenly, Daniel ran toward her playfully, laughing as he reached for her hand. "Catch me if you can," he teased. Nora laughed and playfully chased him, their joy echoing through the garden. Breathless and giggling, Daniel finally stopped and gently embraced her. Holding her close, he looked deeply into her eyes. "Nora," he whispered tenderly, "I used to live in darkness. I saw nothing clearly, even though my eyes worked." Nora smiled softly. "And now?" she asked. "Now," Daniel replied warmly, placing his hand over her stomach. "I see clearly, all because of you." Nora's eyes filled with happy tears. "We both learned to see clearly, Daniel, with our hearts." They stood quietly in each other's arms, the breeze wrapping around them gently. Some people chase gold and miss diamonds, but love finds those who are ready to see with the heart. The story ends here, reminding everyone of a simple truth. Greed and pride may promise quick riches, but only kindness, patience, and true love bring lasting happiness. Nora and Daniel's laughter faded into peaceful silence, but their story remained alive in every heart, teaching that true wealth is found in love and kindness. For Sandra, the path ahead was uncertain. Would she learn from her pain and rebuild her life? Or would pride continue to hold her back? That choice belonged to her alone. But for Daniel and Nora, their hearts had already chosen wisely. They chose love, and love chose them back. Hey besties, was Daniel right to pretend blindness for love? If you enjoyed this story, type heart in the comment section for more stories.